All right, thank you everyone so much for joining today. I'm excited to dig right in. We've got three incredible panelists here for us to share all of their wisdom on customer advisory boards. So just to give some of the groundwork, and we'll start off with some brief intros. If I could ask each panelist to let us know your name, role, state one or two lines about your cab, and the most important question, of course, is the karaoke song of choice that you would sing. Although I won't ask you to sing it. And maybe Shauna, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Shauna. I'm from HubSpot, and I'm a program manager on our Voice of the Customer team. So in terms of our customer advisory board, we actually established our first board towards the end of 2019, around October time, and we ran a full term with that board. We've just graduated, and we've just recruited in our second board, so just about to get started with our second term. In terms of my favorite, like my karaoke song, I don't do karaoke, but maybe when it's just one or two people and it's in my own house, I think something like Wannabe, Spice Girls. I think everyone loves a bit of Spice Girls on a night out. So yeah.
Excellent choice. Excellent choice. Mike, let's go to you next.
Cool, thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Rizzo. I am the manager of community and loyalty programs at Mavenlink. And we have a cab of about 11 people so far. We really just got started this year. So I'm kind of coming at you with the ground zero on through launch, a little bit behind Shauna and Kalina. And my favorite song, if I had to pick one, even though I also do not karaoke ever, would have to be Journey, Don't Stop Believin'. Fun fact, my distant uncle and my family used to drum for that band. So
Nice.
It's kind of a favorite one for me. Also, just real quick little plug for us, shameless plug, sorry everybody, just in case you're interested, we are hiring on the client success team, which I report into. So if you're interested, email me, mrizzo@mavenlink.com.
If they like what you have to say today. Otherwise,
Hi, I'm Kalina, Bryant. I'm based, well, I split my time. I'm in Long Beach right now and spend most of my time in San Francisco when it's not COVID. I head up customer advocacy at Asana. I'll be highlighting some of my past experience about designing customer advisory boards at Anaplan, Talkdesk, and Signified. And I joined Asana about 3 months ago, and I'm actually building from scratch and planning to launch their first global customer advisory board in 2021. I'm so excited to share with you sort of like the pre-COVID customer advisory board strategy and adapting and actually outlining the new strategy for customer advisory boards and how to get that look and feel, surprise, and delight there. My karaoke song, which I've actually never did karaoke. Well, I've done karaoke, but I never picked this song. It would be my song if I'm probably in the spirit, would be Whitney Houston. Want to dance with someone. I've sung it many times in the shower, but not ready to sing it to just some strangers.
That's a good one.
That's a really good one. That's on my shower playlist. That and How Will I Know.
Exactly.
Both incredible songs.
In the shower, I totally think that I sound like her, but I'm not ready to sound like her.
Yeah, we'll save that for another webinar. But yes, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ben. I manage community at Catalyst, and I actually was working on our customer advisory board initiative and constantly pinging Mike and then Shauna and people for questions and advice. And so when I saw that there was an interest in the community, I figured let's externalize this and all learn together. So very excited to dig into the content we have today. If you have any questions, please submit them through the control panel on the right, that little question mark button. Definitely want to hear from you. We'll try to leave some time at the end. But like I said, all of you submitted great questions when you registered, so there's a lot of ground to cover. To start things off, I promise I won't ask every panelist every question, but to start things off, I do want to hear from each of you. I want to know what the purpose of your customer advisory board is, and what are the kind of main benefits for for the company and for the members. If you can list a couple of those benefits and the purpose of your customer advisory board. And maybe Kalina, we'll go reverse order. We'll start with you for this one.
Okay, sure thing. So on my end, I always look at the business goals of the company first. and really understand the stage that the company is in, whether it's a startup or a company that just went public. You really need your customers to be advocates, and you really need your executive customers to be raving fans of you, but also be able to give you critical feedback when you're thinking about your product roadmap, when you're thinking about how you are positioned in the industry. So I take a stance and really look at where do we want to go as a company, one. And then from there, I look at our strategic accounts. And based on those strategic accounts, I ask myself, well, do we have any relationships with these accounts? And if it's no, that's okay too, but it really gives you a baseline as to where you stand with your customers. So for me, when I think about a customer advisory board, the meaning of it is to actually get trusted individuals that are invested in you, invested in your product, and they have a sense of seniority that will go a long way in regards to if they give you a whole day of your time or of their time, and they're nitpicking your product roadmap. Those are individuals that are telling you, hey, that thing that you are really heads down on and you want to roll out in the next quarter, that customer advisory board member might tell you, I don't care about that. Why are you spending that many hours on it? So that feedback is really crucial. And I would also say, when thinking about, how we want to be represented from a branding perspective, your CAB members, it's interesting. They love you, but they also give you that feedback that sometimes you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. So I would say a customer advisory board ultimately is putting the right people in the room that's going to make you better in the future, but also it's going to give you that feedback that you need to be successful. And ultimately, those are the bread and butter of who might need to do your references. If you think about having 8 to 10 customer advisory board members, these individuals might be C-level executives or VPs. And if they trust you and they're taking their time, they're also willing to give the reference calls for your late stage big deals, that last deal that's coming in that says, I need to talk to a customer that really enjoys you. Those customer advisory board members are more than willing to do that for you. So when we really sum it up, is picking a group of individuals that are dedicated to making sure the product is successful, and they understand that they're not just a number, they're not just a person paying you, but they're now seen as a partner to make sure that your company is successful.
Definitely. A lot of great points there. Mike, is there anything that you would add to that? And especially on the member side, I think Kalina, you did an excellent job highlighting kind of a lot of the benefits for the company and why a company would want to have these CAB members. What would motivate Mike? Maybe you can speak to what would motivate those CAB members to want to spend their full day giving time to the company, and if there's anything additionally you'd add to the kind of overall purpose of a CAB.
Yeah, I think it's hard to add to that. Kalina hit a lot of the nail on the head there. Didn't miss at all. So for us, it's very similar, right? We want to build a CAB that we can learn from, right? And when I think about when we were putting this together, right? We're at the very beginning of this. We were thinking about what would the value be for CAB members, and we actually positioned a couple of things in the invite process, and one of them was, first and foremost, just by the nature of our particular industry, the ability to learn and collaborate with their peers, just not even related to the product necessarily, just the ability to hear the struggles of running a services delivery business, the professional services organization, from other peers is super, super valuable. And they're peer matched, right? So we kept them at director level or above, and that was one of the big focuses that we took. We also shared that they would have first look access into new features and functionality, of course, because that's some of the stuff that they're investing in our product. So they obviously want to see the roadmap, and they want to have a louder voice in what could potentially be built. And eventually we want to get to a place where we're hopeful that we can promote their involvement, maybe showcase them as thought leaders in the space as well. So kind of bring that into the fold of the, I hate to call it the marketing engine, but it really is a part of that, right? But it's also elevating their presence as leaders in their space. And so we positioned that as a potential opportunity as well. So, coming to speaking opportunities at maybe our sales kickoff event, we call that Mavenlink Go. Maybe other hopefully one day when everybody's back to being able to see everyone again. We'll have our own little conference and things like that. So we'll see.
Excellent. Phenomenal. I mean, that covered a lot. Shauna, is there anything additional you'd add? I think we've had 2 great answers so far.
Yeah, I think you guys covered most of it. I would just say that I suppose when we started our cab, it was interesting. We started it kind of as more of a how do we improve customer experience. So we were very focused on that in terms of like how do we remove friction from our flywheel, which is basically like how do we market, service, sell. As part of that, we really kind of focused in on like the customer experience and like how are our service team performing, how do our sales team perform, and is it the right experience as they go through all of those channels. But we've definitely pivoted a little bit more, and now we're more focused on kind of go-to-market strategy, product feedback. So we've kind of moved a little bit from that and started to get involved in more of the broader organization. And with that, we've actually moved from sitting within customer success, where we started the voice of the customer team, to actually sitting within go-to-market, because we can touch all of these other teams as well.
Interesting. Then that's something we should probably come back to, is kind of where this sits within an org and who's involved. Couple more kind of structural questions. How many members are in each of your cabs? And have you figured there's some sort of magic number that you want to aim for? Mike, let's start with you.
We have 11 members in our cab across 10 organizations. One of our clients is extra special. No, we just wanted to make sure that we had the right people from each of those organizations. Actually, there was a question that I think we had on the list here around how do you make them not feel left out, right? And that's how you make them not feel left out. If they have a peer that is in their organization that deserves to definitely be alongside them on the cab, I think it's well worth opening up another seat. So we do have 11 members across 10 clients.
Excellent. And Kalina, I mean, I think you mentioned you've started and run 3 cabs before, and now you're doing this new one. What's been sort of your thought on the number of folks to involve?
Yeah, I cut it off at 10, but Mike actually makes a good point. When someone actually expresses all the interest and you really can't pass them up, I would say you should definitely consider that, because that extra person might actually, bring so much value that you just can't get anywhere else. And you also got to think about the customer experience, right? Like, we have this number. I personally think 10 is the max, just because when you have everyone in a room and you're also bringing in your executives from your company, there's so much you can get at, after you get to like 15 people in a room. There's going to be someone that gets on their phone, or starts to look in the sky and dawdle and doesn't look at the product roadmap. But if it's intimate enough, then everyone is engaged. But I would say play it at ad hoc basis. I would say just don't have like 20 people in your cab, because you're not going to get as much value, and you also run the risk of having too many opinions when you go too far. And then you have to think about, when you're designing a group like that, then you have to look at your councils. Your customer advisory board is supposed to be strategic and select members, and if you want 20 or more, then really look at the councils and break that out into the tracks that you're focused on.
I really like that thought, Kalina. I'm going to just jump on that really quick. When we were architecting our again, early days, right? So we're thinking about how we architect this. One of the thought processes we had was perhaps we do, director and above and kind of manager level from the same organization, and then do a breakout session for each of those individually. And because of the nature of COVID and what we're going through right now, that's just not a thing. Yes, you can do breakout rooms in Zoom and all that stuff, but to kind of echo what you're saying, that felt like it was going to get really overwhelming really fast when you have 20 people in a room plus your team. So we ended up doing exactly what you said, which is just hone in, like focus on 10 and 11. So
10 plus 1.
10 plus 1.
Shauna, how about yourself? What's the size of the cab at HubSpot?
I might come in and say like 20 now, but no, we have
Yeah, exactly. That'd be awkward, wouldn't it?
We were aiming for 12. We ended up going a little bit over with 14, but we are a global customer advisory board, so trying to find, still have enough people, enough representation from each kind of market that we serve. We just end up stretching it that little bit further to 14. But just with time zones and things like that, sometimes it suits, certain time zones, it doesn't suit different people. So we often find that maybe on the call, it actually comes down to about 10 people, just depending on which time zone we're going to join in with. So But I think something we're definitely thinking about is going forward is with our customer advisory board, it is a global board. We are trying to get a broad representation of all our customers, and we have such a big mix of customers. We're thinking about how do we, I suppose, segment further as we go forward. Do we do multiple customer advisory boards, or do we kind of do a breakdown of councils? So that is something we're thinking about. So
great segue, because I know that that's a question a lot of people have as well that we're thinking about too, is multiple advisory boards. The two kind of my two thoughts on it are you could do it by vertical. So if you serve multiple verticals, you could divide up your customer advisory board that way, or maybe have different product streams or product tiers. Or the angle that I'm thinking of specifically for Catalyst is I'm hoping to have a executive customer advisory board, and then I want a CSM customer advisory board, like an end user, so that we're getting kind of this bird's eye view and then, in the trenches kind of view. Is that something any of you have done or thinking about doing? I'll throw this one out into the ether, and whoever wants to jump on it.
I can just say that we haven't done this yet. The way we're thinking about it, we're definitely thinking in terms of more so persona. I think they get a lot more value when they're in the same type of role. Maybe it's more specific to HubSpot in that we have like a sales tool, we have a marketing tool, so we could have a head of sales versus a head of marketing, and they have very different feedback in terms of what they're using. So that's how we're thinking about it going forward. But I think also in terms of size of company as well, like we have these big enterprise customers, and then we have these smaller customers with very different needs. So we're still figuring it out, but there are some of the ways we're thinking about it.
Excellent. Yeah, this came up quite literally last night. We have a strategic meeting once every couple of weeks with our peer groups internally to talk about the momentum of CAB and how we can continue leveraging it and provide value back to our members. And one of the big discussions is on whether or not we should break out a specific vertical for one of our verticals that we serve. The initial thought process right now is no, but start with kind of I think our head of marketing or VP of communications said it best. She said, crawl, walk, run, right? And the idea is maybe start with a peer group of just like a small consortium of those users that say, hey, do you want to have a meeting amongst kind of your industry vertical peers and talk a little bit about some of the feedback that we're hearing from a couple of the members in the CAB, and would you want to lead that, and then see how that goes, and from there maybe start branching into let's move you wholly out of like how different are the conversations really from what we're already having amongst all the other folks in the CAB, and then potentially branch it out into at least one additional one. But that's just an industry vertical for us. I mean, I did every combination and permutation that you could think of for those that took those fun math classes, and it's hard, because there's everything from enterprise to commercial to just industry to role. And when you think about those like four things, you can mix and match all that all day long in all kinds of different ways. And so I think it just really depends on kind of harking back to what Kalina was saying and what we were all agreeing with in terms of what is your business objective, right? Mm-hmm. And where do you want the organization to go? And then who do you need to speak to ensure that the vision for your business is coming to fruition? Let's build the CAB off of that, right? So, but it's hard. We're trying to figure it out too. We might have a whole separate group.
I'd add on to that too, Mike. I think one of the biggest questions that I always ask myself too is who do I have access to? When looking at the beautiful roster, a lot of the times we would love to have like 10 C-level executives in a room, but do we actually have access to them? And if we were to personally invite that individual, would they actually respond to you? Or if they did respond when you actually have the event, could they commit and actually show up? So I think like the business layout, but also understanding you want to make sure it's juicy when you have these individuals in a room, and are you picking the right people that will actually be as excited and as invested as you are in them?
That's a great point. I think when it goes to selection, and kind of the excitement has to be both ways for sure. Expectations have to be set early. There has to be sort of a standard of engagement probably, and then that would also, I would assume, be used as the basis if there is someone who's disengaged or not engaging to the proper extent, if you need to ask them to recuse themselves from the advisory board, or you know, I don't know if there's a more polite way to do that, but Kalina, looks like you have a thought on that.
I don't know if you all do this. Actually, I have a good friend actually at Google where I told her I actually give contracts out to cab members before they have to sign it, and it
Love that.
basically says like you have 10, you know, it's a 12-month opportunity. But within that 12-month opportunity, you know, there's clauses in there that states that you have to attend, you know, at one point it was like one in-person customer advisory board, but also one virtual check-in. And it was basically, I would send the contract along with a charter that states like, what is this customer advisory board? What's the benefits on your end, but also what's the expectations? Because you never want someone to just say like, yeah, and then 3 months later, after you do all of this work, you message that person and they're like, oh, I'm in Hawaii, sorry, I can't commit.
Yeah.
So ahead of time, people get all nervous, you know, when you get a contract, it becomes real because you're signing and you're actually committing. And you know, after 12 months, you actually get to look at, you know, it's an interview session too. What did you get from them? You know, and vice versa. Like when you think about a customer advisory board, you're sort of pushing out a lot of budget for this, you know, especially let's remove the times of COVID, but in normal times, that's a whole day. You know, you pick a really nice area, they're flying in, they're getting wined and dined, you know,
Mhm.
from the beginning to end. And it's like that's sometimes 20 grand, 30 grand of just budget. And in return, selfishly for a company, you want to make sure that if you're giving this, that you receive a certain amount of information or commitment back. So within that, I just say, hey, let's just keep it on the up and up ahead of time. If we're interested in you, here's the contract. But also, if you're interested in our cab, you know, you get some benefits as well. So make sure that you can commit.
I love that, and I'm absolutely going to steal that, as I'm sure many people this webinar are
Don't
going to do.
worry.
I think it's a great
Don't
idea.
worry. If you need the contract layout, I have about 3 options for you. So just ping me.
Incredible. I will do that and disseminate widely. Excellent. And you segued beautifully into probably one of the most pressing questions that I saw 50 times in the registration, which is we're now in COVID, so we can no longer wine and dine people and fly them around. Upside, saving 20 to 30 grand on these cab meetings. Downside, how do you keep cab members engaged, excited, you know, and make these sessions valuable remotely? Shauna, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think we're all still figuring this one out, but with our one, we're just after kicking off our new cab. So we always start with like some nice swag that we send them, some gifts to welcome them, get them kind of excited for the year and what's to come. We're still kind of hopeful that we might get to do something in person next year, but we haven't made any commitment to that. Instead, to keep them engaged, what we've done is kind of outlined what the content is going to be for the year. So every 3 months, we're going to do a knowledge sharing session where they can come in and tell their story and get feedback from other members of the customer advisory board. And we'll have like a set date to do that every 3 months. I think that's something we learned from the last one we did. They just love kind of sharing those ideas with each other, kind of sharing what their pain points are, roadblocks, what they're coming up against. So we put in set time for them to do that in like smaller breakout sessions. And then we're also going to kick off early in the year a session with our executive team, which is something that we did in person last year, but we're going to move it online. And it's basically like a town hall session where they'll dial in. We'll use like a Miro board or some kind of a whiteboard, and we'll ask them all like, what do they like about HubSpot? What do they not like? We'll capture everything on the board and we'll get them to vote on what's most important to them. So we did this in person last year on big whiteboards, and we had them go up and vote with like sticky notes, and our executive team watched the whole session along with the entire company actually. But this year we're going to just make this move online and try to repeat the same thing. We've done it with smaller groups in the past, but not our customer advisory board. So we've done small test runs to see how this will work. And we're hopeful it will work well, moving it over for the customer advisory board.
That's a
Excellent.
good one, Shauna. I'm gonna write that one down.
I love that one. We did that with our group as well. When we launched, we did a meet everybody. We did an hour and a half just session of, you know, get to know one another, icebreaker questions, all kinds of stuff. And then we went through a voting exercise virtually where pre-meeting, we had surveyed them to ask about some of the core challenges they're faced with over the next 12 months. And in the previous 12 months, what they had maybe overcome. And then we consolidated that into some themes. And then we said, out of this cab, what would you, if you have 3 votes, where would you like them to fall? They all got to vote. And then live, it was just a Google slide. It was nothing fancy. Live, we just said, okay, well, here's what everybody said. And then moving forward, looks like these are the core topics we're going to focus on, at least for the near term. And I really liked that exercise. It was one we wanted to, of course, do in person. It would have been ideal. But because then the beauty of that, and so like for everybody listening, and we all, I think, understand this, Kalina, Shauna, Ben, when you all have everybody in a room, and they're all able to do that, this natural, very organic bit of conversation starts to happen. They start to do this like, yeah, here's this idea I had. Oh, tell me a little bit about that. And if you have somebody sitting in the room with you as a note taker strategically, just being a fly on the wall, just trying to listen for those key touch points, that's the touch points exercise. You take all those notes, and then after the voting session is done, and then you look back at the notes that the in-between conversations that somebody could actually pick up some of that bit, that's the stuff that really makes it super interesting, right? But you lose that when you're virtual. So you have to do the best you can. I think, this voting stuff is at least fun for folks. So
Definitely. And I know, Mike, as well, you sent out some cool virtual swag as sort of a part of your welcome gift, right?
Yeah, oh, that's right. So in terms of excitement, I should focus on the exciting stuff.
We want
did
boring.
yeah, voting and talking strategy. So we did send out what we called the virtual cab enablement pack. That included a microphone that could either be mounted or put on your desktop, a light, a ring light, and oh gosh, one more item. There were 3 items on there. I apologize, I'm forgetting.
Bottle
But
of wine.
it was yeah, I had a bottle of wine, so you could be having fun while we do the meetings. No, but essentially it helped the cab members have a better experience. Oh, it was a camera, duh, right?
Oh,
So we
yeah.
gave them a light, a camera, and a mic, so that they could have a better experience, so that they aren't just like stuck on their laptop camera or something like that. Because we had noticed that the experience wasn't as pleasant if you were, forced to be kind of stuck on just this little tiny, maybe not so great camera. We want everybody to feel like they're seeing everybody the same, right? So we did that. They enjoyed it. Although some clients can't accept gifts. So watch out.
I've definitely run into that before. And Shauna, I wanted to quickly come back to something you said that will lead into kind of my next question that I'm excited about. You mentioned that I think you live stream your cab sessions to the entire company.
Yeah, so well, we did it with that it was actually our cab day, as we call it. So it was like the one in-person event, and we actually ended up doing it in our headquarters in Boston. A lot of our customers love going and seeing the HubSpot office and kind of getting that full experience of being there. So we hosted it there. And for the town hall session that I talked about, where they kind of brainstorm, they vote, all of that, we had in the room, we had our executive team kind of sitting back and listening in, and they kind of got to meet and greet with them before it. But we actually live streamed that event, yeah, to the whole entire company. So we did a bit of internal promotion, let everyone know that this is going to be happening. And the feedback that we got from HubSpotters was really, really good. So they just really enjoyed like the transparency of it, being able to actually listen in, and just, I suppose some people like commented it was the most transparent event that HubSpot had ever put on, because you're just literally asking your customers for their feedback in front of the entire organization. And also because the customers, we thought, we were at first a bit worried, like would they be a bit put off, like they know this is going to be live streamed to the full entire company, will they really share everything? But we managed to do it quite discreetly with the help of our IT team. So we had just a little microphone sitting around the desk. We had the normal like camera that we live stream all our conferences to. So it was you wouldn't know that it was being live streamed if you were in the room. So it actually worked really well. They did know it.
You weren't secretly recording and broadcasting your C-suite customer.
No, we definitely told them in advance, and we made sure they were comfortable and they felt prepared to go into that. We didn't want to spring that on them as they walked into the room, for sure.
So that brings me to my next question, which is bringing other departments into this, right? Which is something we've talked a lot about at Catalyst for ours, right? So I'm thinking something about, let's give each department head 5 minutes to present their priorities or ask one question to the group or something like that, so that our cab members feel like they're exposed to the whole company, they know everyone, or at least the leads for each department. How do you guys involve each of your departments? And there's two sides to that. So in the meeting itself, like, do they present or do they share part of a deck or something like that ahead of time? And the flip side is, how do you then disseminate information from the CAB meeting back to the rest of the company? So Sean, I mean, you gave us a bit of an idea there with the recording, but Mike and Kalina would love to get your thoughts on this.
Kalina, go for it.
Okay, throw me on the spot. No, this is a good question, actually. And I think about this a lot because personally, right now in my new segment, I was used to building customer advisory boards actually in marketing. And at one of my companies, I was in marketing and then transitioned my program into customer success and then back into marketing. At Asana, I'm actually in the revenue org, which is actually really cool because I get to have the opportunity to meet hands-on with the customers and really understand their needs. But on the creative side, I have to work cross-functionally very closely with our marketing team, and then work with our customer success team. And within all that, I think that whoever owns cabs or anything customer facing, you are like, you're in every department, really. Your layout isn't, it's just a logo, I would say. But ultimately, I would say that you have to work cross functionally in order to get every aspect. So I always pick the head, whoever is leading marketing, or whoever has like kind of the best layout that they can really get the room happy and excited. I always pick someone from marketing. On a customer advisory board, and I always kind of introduce myself and like the vision and reason why we actually chose you and how excited we are. And then also having someone from the executive team. A lot of the times I make sure that we can have our CEO that really shows up and gives 5 to 10 minutes as to why it was so important to have them in a room and just to thank them. I think that goes a long way. One, because you get to see that the whole company is involved. If the CEO can give you 10 minutes of the time to just talk to you, that just really, I think, elevates the cab and makes people feel special. But then also from a product perspective, that's your bread and butter. I always work very closely with our product team, really making sure that they have their roadmap in order and they know what they want to present, because at some point in the cab, you're going to do these breakout sessions. And ultimately for me, the product team is the one that takes the most value because they can actually understand, hey, I'm on the right track, or hey, we got to go back to the drawing board here. We got so much feedback as to what we're doing wrong. So I would say that whoever is the head of our product management team, they're definitely coming in and they're giving a presentation on the roadmap. They usually have 2 to 3 people from their team based on the breakout sessions. Usually whoever is leading that track or segment, they're coming in to give a little spill as well. And then lastly, our customer success team, there's usually a head there that's really just sort of behind the scenes listening, but at some point they're really highlighting the value of adoption, the value of retention, and like utilization is one of their key focuses. So I know that's like a bit of a ramble, but I usually handpick probably a person from customer success, product, marketing, and sales, and
Excellent.
the C-suite person.
Excellent. That's a great roster. Mike, anything you would add to that?
Not really. We had our CEO join the very first session. He certainly has joined in and listened on the second session. So the first two, again, the first one was just kind of introductions, and everybody got to know each other. We did a lot of, just being extra grateful and gracious and saying, thank you for your time, right? I think you can't say thank you enough to your clients. And in our follow-up meeting, the very first one, we had the head of our product organization do a presentation on the roadmap and kind of what we call the product arc and the vision, some bets that we're making, and we wanted to collect feedback on that. And so throughout the session, he actually gathered feedback. He's a wizard when it comes to presenting. I think he's fantastic. So he did a really phenomenal job there. And then in the very next one, it was a bit different. We actually stepped away. It was a lot less Mavenlink, and a lot more peer-to-peer collaboration. But I think that was really just the nature of where this cab wanted to go. They wanted to talk amongst each other about some of the core challenges in their businesses and how they're leveraging our tools among others, integrations and so forth, to solve their business challenges. So we went pretty hands off on the last session. We didn't have any real message come from Mavenlink other than our relatively new appointed CMO joined, and he shared maybe 3 minutes on some of the work we're doing around our brand strategy, and just to get them kind of that early insider information into what's going on. And then we actually asked to have a follow-up session with them, but otherwise it was full collaboration. And so in terms of who gets involved, Kalina, you're absolutely right. I think we can't figure out, it's like I'm in client success proper in that part of the org, and super strong dotted lines to knowledge, which sits in product, to support, to training, to marketing, to sales, advocacy. All of those programs are, spread out amongst different departments. And so I think it's just a matter of wherever your org is wants to put you. And as long as you've got that buy-in and you can build those relationships, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that as well. I think something we've noticed, I think once you promote your customer advisory board enough internally, a lot of these departments are going to end up coming to you saying, like, this really cool thing, but I'd love to involve the customer advisory board. So we have like an internal form that departments can fill out if they have something they want to put in front of the board, and we can think about how we build that in throughout the year as well. And we also make sure that they all sign an NDA. I know Kalina has a contract. We do an NDA and a charter to make sure that we can be as transparent as we like with the board, and share things in advance.
I second that, Shauna. I actually also give the NDA. It's just safer for people, and I think they're just more comfortable when they're in a room.
Definitely. I want to pause because we've had some great audience questions come in. I want to make sure we're addressing those. So feel free to, folks, write in more questions as we go through these. I want to make sure we're answering as many of your questions as possible, not just mine. How do you feel? So David Allen is asking, how do you feel about having competitors serve on a cab?
Ooh, that's a tricky one.
So I think we're talking like clients that compete with each other.
Yes, at least that's what I said.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, hey, kudos to you if you can get your company's competitors to advise
your company's competitors, right? That'd be interesting.
I think you need to integrate with some weird. Yeah, so let's assume that it's your customers that are competing with each other. Do any of you have competing customers on a cab together?
I don't have any, though. You can make the argument that when you're serving, so one of the reasons you may not want to go down the verticalized cab model is that, for example, we service professional service orgs and marketing agencies, right? So if I threw 10 completely different marketing agencies together that are all relatively large in nature and size, there's a chance that they could be seen as competitors to one another. Mm-hmm. I think the very same is true for professional services organizations and IT services or something like that. So I was a little worried about that at the beginning, but in terms of transparency and just saying, here's who's going to be involved so far, here's the logos that we're targeting for this cab. Do you feel you would want to be involved in this group? I think you can try to get around it a little bit and see if anybody has any qualms, but so far we've been good. But yeah, I think that's definitely a valid concern, particularly if you happen to serve like one particular vertical or something like that.
Yeah, people have to feel safe to share, right? And safe to share their company's problems. I mean, I feel like the biggest thing with a cab is identifying what are the biggest challenges our customers are facing, so that we can make sure that we're addressing them properly. And if you have direct competitors, they may be very uncomfortable to say what their biggest challenge that they're currently facing is, even if there is an NDA. So maybe that's an argument for the multiple cabs, but
Quick,
making sure there's no competitors.
yeah, quick comment on the NDA piece, and this is something that I heard from someone else internally at my org that used to run cabs at another company. The NDA, and Kalina, maybe you can speak to this, and maybe it's just knowledge for all of us here listening today. Our understanding is that though I've had the member sign an NDA, it doesn't necessarily preclude them from like taking information shared by somebody else in the cab. Like it's between our brands and them, not between each other, right? They didn't sign one amongst each other.
Mhm.
So from a legal perspective, I am certainly not a lawyer, but I just want to make sure that nobody just falls back on an NDA, just saying like,
Right.
you know, Mike and Ben and everybody are talking about NDAs. It seems like we're safe. Do your due diligence and decide if that is what you need and if it's entirely safe. We have decided that it's not quite there yet, and we haven't really figured out a way to make sure that it is. But and the reason that this is coming up is because in our last meeting, I actually went and cut out some content by the request of one of the members so that it wasn't shared back with the team. So
Excellent.
That's a Mike. I just want to chime in on that because that's a good question, because usually when we have the in-person cabs, I usually have one of the cab members give like a customer story of like their journey, and they actually share some data, and they really kind of go in as to basically ups and downs of their company and where they are now. And so when I thought about the NDA, and then also in email and in contract, it's basically just stated that like it's like a Vegas thing. What happens in this room stays in this room.
Yeah.
And so that's a good point. And I think that I would say leverage your lawyer at the company just to make sure. Like I know personally, I don't send anything out until the lawyer blesses it on our side. But that's something to consider. But also just when you're picking the people, I think that when they understand like the contract and their NDA, that they should know basically Vegas rule before you join. That's a good point.
Totally with you on that.
Just host your next cab in Vegas, and then you don't even need the NDA. It's already in place. A couple questions about timing, bandwidth, that sort of thing. So I'm curious about this as well. What was the timeline from ideation to execution of your cab? How long did it take to get the first meeting set? As a question from Beth. Shauna, how long did that take you from a HubSpot perspective? Because I know it's massive org, lots of moving parts.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back which time to talk about. So when we said, I'll talk about this time around, because last time I kind of stepped in, it was just set up, so I wasn't involved in like the whole creation of the first board. For this one, we gave ourselves 3 months to recruit the members. So they've just been recruited, selected, notified. So we give ourselves that full 3 months to like source them, send out contracts, get everything signed and get them in place. And they're in place since last week. So now if you think about it, our first session is going to be in January, but that's very much like a networking, get to know each other session. It's not a big, heavy lift. It's kind of more for them to kind of get to know each other. Our first real session with the executive team will be March. So we're nearly giving ourselves a full other 3 months to kind of get ourselves prepped for that, which will be the virtual town hall session that I talked about earlier. So if you think about it from like the start to our first big session, we're giving ourselves 6 months, which I think is like what you need minimum. Yeah, I don't know if the other guys have different thoughts on this, but that's kind of what we give ourselves.
No, Shauna, I think selfishly, just like the layout that you have right now, it puts you in a good position to hopefully when you're ready for the big all-day session, COVID has passed or there's something that will allow us to be in person. But I think just to chime off of that, at my previous company, I started in, I think it was a December, and then really got everyone on board by January, and we launched our full customer advisory board in July, and we flew everyone into San Diego, and it was a parallel span of customer advisory board was one day, but then we had a big customer kind of meetup, like a rooftop experience, where it was like basically a party, where other customers and late stage prospects came in. So that total took 6 months basically, but that was to plan 2 events, so a cab and then also like just customer surprise and delight meet and greet.
Kalina, can I join the Asana customer advisory board? It sounds like a good time.
Yeah, it's a really
I
nice
use it, I
time.
swear.
Based on previous experience, it sounds like what you're
Trust
putting
me,
together now is going to be great.
my
Yeah,
previous
exactly.
team used to always say if we were ever on cabs, this is how we wanted to be treated. We would rank like how we felt, and we
Yeah,
always would judge. If we got invited to something else, we would judge and say, it's not as good as ours. Like they still have work to do.
it's the best approach to take. Build the cab that you'd want to be a part of yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
Hey, that's a good quote. You should use that one
thank you.
after this.
Everyone tweet that right now
Yeah.
at Mr. Ben Winn. Um, okay, we've got about a million questions. Let's go into. Okay. I really like this question from Layla. Are C-level cab members close enough to your product or solution to give valuable enough specific product feedback, or do you use it more directionally?
I could take that one actually. That's a really great question. At my previous cab, and this is also something that I'm exploring at Asana, if you want senior leaders, what I realized, they actually don't touch your product, their teams touch it and they just want to see the results. So if I take my past company, it was a fraud protection software. And really, our customers didn't want to hear from us unless there was a problem. So if a customer contacted you at a previous company, something went wrong, there was a big fraud glitch. But to get the C-level executives in a room, it was more so connections. They wanted to network and they wanted access and they wanted to also be seen as a thought leader at that time within e-commerce. And so we looked at the product, but they looked at the product in a sense of numbers, right? So they were looking at revenue. And really tying in if our product did its job, how did that actually help them and how was that beneficial for them to present those numbers and savings to their board. So if we think about it, they never really touched the product, but they looked at it in a sense of how can we drive innovation and how can I basically use this product and present to my boss basically as to how much revenue I'm either bringing in or how much revenue I'm saving the company. So that was a big spin. So I would say aligning, if you're going to just have C-levels, you have to think outside of the box with a product roadmap, but also tie it into at some point how much money are we, like, just bring it back to numbers, bring it back to revenue, bring it back to ROI. And I think that really puts a great tone. And that's, I think, something that I will probably be focusing on with Asana because the end users love Asana. But at the same time, I think executives definitely love Asana. They know the brand, but I think on their end, we have to focus on if we're going to have you in a room for basically 4 to 5 hours, what's going to get your attention. And one thing that always gets executives' attention is ROI, revenue, and how they're going to lead a team regardless of what time you're in it, even if it's COVID or not COVID.
Mhm. Excellent point. I think CS people are probably really familiar with that too, like needing to just make sure everything ties back to a dollar sign in order to get buy-in or engagement or that sort of thing. That's really important. And that leads to, I'm going to be selfish and ask one of my own questions again. That leads me to a question I really wanted to know, which is what are your success metrics for your customer advisory board meetings? How do you look at a customer advisory board meeting and say, that was a success or that was not a success, here's what we need to work on, or yes, this is providing value for our company, it's worth me flying everyone out to Vegas or doing a private island like Kim Kardashian or whichever Kardashian did that private party last month. So yeah, we'd love to hear a bit about that.
Selfishly, Shauna, can I hear your thought process? Because I really like your layout so far with your timeline this year.
I was gonna say that this is a really tough one, and in the like last year was our first board, and we didn't really set like exact metrics to go for. We just wanted an established board. We wanted to run a certain amount of events in the year. We wanted to have like a process in place for getting the board together. And I remember I had joined like a customer advisory board training day, and this is what they were saying. They said like for the first year, you just need to get the process in place and get the like everything set up the way you want, and then think about like what do you want to measure. For us, we do kind of like a survey after every session to make sure that the cab members got value out of it, and we ask them for feedback in terms of what we could improve. Something we're thinking more about this year is we have an internal process called customer roadblocks, where when a customer gives feedback of like a roadblock that they're coming up against or something they can't do, we log it on our system underneath that customer profile. And when we've cleared that roadblock or when product has like overcome that or delivered something that will solve for it, we'll close off the roadblock. So we can see how many of those roadblocks were logged versus how many have we actually managed to close. So this is something we're looking at this year, is as we log roadblocks, can we hashtag CAB on it, so we know that roadblock came from the CAB, so we can see what feedback they've given, and then what have we actually solved for by the end of the year. So this is just something we're starting to trial, but I think that's how we'll think about measuring it going forward.
Very cool idea.
We're doing something similar to that, Shauna, in that we want to look at it. We internalize the product feedback. So we don't have like a voting board. I know HubSpot has an ideas engine, right? We don't have that. So what we do is we pass all the kind of roadblocks or the product enhancement request feedback through the client success organization. And then, of course, those are all tied to the account itself. And so what we look at is we try twofold. One is, of course, if the CAB client account provided feedback, we'll try to circle back to that and say, here's what we heard from you, here's what we've done so far. But we also try to look across the rest of similar peers and say, here's what others are also talking about, and here's how it aligns to that product roadmap, product arc that we were sharing with you in the very first meeting. And here's what we've delivered based on the feedback that we've received from other peers like you as well, so that they understand that their voice is heard, and we're also trying to take inputs from similar peer groups, so we're not just it's not a what is it? It's not echo chamber. It's not a you know what I mean. It's not like a one-way thing, or it's just like one voice only or something like that. But I really like that idea that you have there. That's cool.
Yeah.
That you have the
we do a similar thing to you, Mike, as in when we close a roadblock, we'll write on that kind of customer portal, and we'll let the account manager know to close the loop with them and let them know that this has been solved. So now that we're putting that like CAB hashtag, they can say, oh, we got this feedback as part of your participation on the CAB. We've actually solved it and we're closing the loop. But I think the difficulty is some of the feedback they give us so like long term or high level. It's like, how do you close the loop on that feedback? It might be like 5 years down the line.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit more difficult. And we're thinking about doing like maybe kind of a newsletter or something like that quarterly, just to give kind of more of a high level feedback in terms of, what direction are we moving in? So that's one way we're thinking about that.
Yeah, and so this question started with, how do you measure the success of your CAB, if I recall, and the same was true for us, Shauna. There's like, just make it happen. Like we need a CAB, right? Like everybody should have a CAB, and it's high time that Mavenlink has a CAB. So let's get it off the ground. Let's build the process. Let's figure out what the CAB members want, and much like you, we survey them at the end of, sometimes before and after, but definitely after, and we ask, what did you think of the last one? What could we have done better? What do you want from the next meeting? And so that's our way of measuring success right now. But I think you've heard it anecdotally through all of the commentary today from Kalina, Shauna, and Ben and I. Like I think when the entire organization, Shauna, you said it, your whole org got to watch the live stream, and they said that was the most valuable thing like we've ever seen, right? Our product org is feeling the same way. We're making a lot of bets right now, and we've hired some really great talent to go figure out what to build next. And the last meeting we had, we shared that recording back with the product team, and they were so thrilled to just have an opportunity to hear the members of the CAB talk about their challenges and how well those align to the things that we're trying to address already without us prompting them. So you may not be able to put a number measurement on that, but if you get that feedback internally, that's a win.
It is a huge win. I think these are all great points, and I think even taking the hashtag idea will allow us to do some of the things we want to do, which is actually Anne asked this earlier in the question box about correlating CAB engagement with client health metrics and churn and engagement, and I think that's a huge opportunity if you could theoretically show an increase in engagement or higher propensity to renew or less likely to churn or more likely to expand, or they're willing to give more referral calls. Those are probably some of those metrics that might not be a direct A to B, but definitely things that I'm hoping to track and build out with our CAB, because I would like to think that our CAB members are more likely to be engaged, advocate for us, all that good stuff. So those are some thoughts I'm hoping we'll be able to put some sort of dollar sign on.
Hey Ben, I can chime in on that a little bit.
Absolutely.
So my metrics, at least for my upcoming cab, but also my past cab, was heavily on NPS as well.
Mhm.
Like the seeing an increase in that, but also all of my cab members always become a part of my reference program. So looking at that number increase and also looking at um, the reference calls that the cab members take, looking at that correlation, how much longer does it take the deal to close? And can we tie that into a cab member taking that call? And then also from an expansion opportunity, right now, if you look at your accounts, you may not have any executive relationship within that account, but if somehow you hand select that person to be on the cab, if you look at the next 6 months and you look at when that contract is renewed, then you can really understand, well, number one, if they're staying a customer, that's, you could tie that into them being a part of the cab. But also from an expansion opportunity, a lot of the times you don't know what that customer really needs, but then having that cab member on the board to really showcase and have them get a little bit more buy-in, I think is helpful. So what I've been focused on is, number one, adoption as a key metric, and really just showing like the percentage of the cab members that you have. Did you have an increase in adoption? Also expansion, looking at all of those opportunities. If a customer is just on a pilot, at my past company, Toomey's was on my cab, but they were actually a pilot customer. But that person coming on as a cab member actually helped us generate a full contract. So looking at that, and then ultimately just engagement. If you're a startup or not, if you have 0 advocates, right? You can measure, if you have 10 people on your cab and they actually show up and they're engaged, you went from 0 to 10.
Mhm.
So I would look at it in that sense.
Excellent. Great note to leave us on. There's a lot more to cover, but maybe we'll have to have you all back in the future. Thank you so much for your time today. Everyone, find our panelists and shout them out if you learned any great tidbits from them today, so that more people can find them and benefit from their knowledge. If you have any other burning questions, requests about topics, things you want us to cover, my inbox is always open, ben@getcatalyst.io. Thank you so much for joining today, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.